Welcome back. I am Pemberton, and this is Book 5, Part 4, the close of the book. After the violence of the judges, Josephus gives us first a quiet, lovely story from those same days. Ruth, a foreign widow who would not leave her mother-in-law, gleaning in the fields of a good man named Booz, and the marriage that followed, a small kindness with a long shadow, for from it would come kings. Then the dawn the whole age has been waiting for, a barren woman's prayer, the birth of Samuel, the boy given to the sanctuary who hears his name called in the dark and answers for a nation. And finally the disaster that ends the book, the corrupt sons of Eli, the ark of God carried into battle and lost to the Philistines, and the old priest falling dead at the news. Let us finish Book 5.
After the death of Samson, Eli the high priest was governor of the Israelites. Under his government, when the country was afflicted by famine, Elimelech of Bethlehem, a city of the tribe of Judah, was unable to support his family under such severe distress. So he took Naomi his wife and the children born to him by her, Chilon and Mahlon, and moved his home into the land of Moab. When his affairs prospered there, he took Moabite wives for his sons, Orpah for Chilon, and Ruth for Mahlon. But within 10 years, Elimelech died, and a little while afterward his sons also died. Naomi was deeply troubled by these events, and could not bear her lonely condition now that those dearest to her were dead, on whose account she had left her own country. So she returned to it again, for she had been informed that it was now in a flourishing condition. Her daughters-in-law could not bear the thought of parting from her, and when they wanted to leave the country with her, she could not at first dissuade them. But when they insisted, she wished them happier marriages than they had had with her sons, and prosperity in other respects also. Seeing that her own affairs were so low, she urged them to stay where they were, and not to think of leaving their own country and sharing the uncertainty under which she had to return. Accordingly Orpah stayed behind. But Naomi took Ruth with her, because Ruth could not be persuaded to remain behind, and was determined to share Naomi's fortune, whatever it might be. When Ruth came with her mother-in-law to Bethlehem, Booz, who was a close kinsman of Elimelech, received her kindly. When Naomi was called by her fellow citizens according to her true name, she said they might more accurately call her Mara. Naomi in the Hebrew language means happiness, and Mara means sorrow. It was now reaping time. With her mother-in-law's permission, Ruth went out to glean so that they might obtain a supply of grain for food. It happened that she came into Booz's field. After some time Booz came there, and when he saw the young woman, he asked his servant who was set over the reapers about her. The servant had already, a little before, inquired into all her circumstances, and told them to his master. Booz kindly welcomed her, both because of her affection for her mother-in-law and because she remembered the son to whom she had been married. He wished that she might enjoy a prosperous condition. He told her not merely to glean, but to reap whatever she was able, and gave her permission to carry it home. He also charged the servant who was over the reapers not to hinder her when she took it away, and told him to give her dinner and drink when he did the same for the reapers. Ruth kept the grain she received from him for her mother-in-law, and in the evening she came to Naomi and brought the ears of grain with her. Naomi had also kept for Ruth a portion of the food her neighbors had generously given her. Ruth told her mother-in-law what Booz had said to her. When Naomi informed her that he was near of kin to them, and perhaps was such a pious man that he would make some provision for them, Ruth went out again on the following days to gather gleanings with Booz's maidservants. Not many days later, after the barley had been winnowed, Booz slept on his threshing floor. When Naomi learned this, she arranged for Ruth to lie down by him, because she thought it might be to their advantage for him to speak with the young woman. Accordingly she set Ruth to sleep at his feet. Ruth went as Naomi commanded, for she did not think it consistent with her duty to contradict any command of her mother-in-law. At first she lay concealed from Booz while he was fast asleep. But when he awoke about midnight and perceived a woman lying by him, he asked who she was. When she told him her name and asked that he, whom she acknowledged as her lord, would excuse her, he said no more then. In the morning, before the servants began their work, he woke her and told her to take as much barley as she could carry and go to her mother-in-law before anyone there saw that she had lain down by him. It was prudent, he said, to avoid any reproach that might arise from it, especially since nothing wrong had been done. But as for the main point she aimed at, the matter should rest here. The man who was nearer of kin than Booz would be asked whether he wanted to take her as his wife. If he said he did, she should follow him, but if he refused, Booz would marry her according to the law. When Ruth told her mother-in-law about this, they were very glad because they hoped Booz would make provision for them. Around noon, Booz went down into the city and gathered the Senate together. After he had sent for Ruth, he also called for her kinsman. When the man came, Booz asked whether he retained the inheritance of Elimelech and his sons. The man acknowledged that he did retain it, and that he did so as the laws permitted, because he was their nearest kinsman. Then Booz said that he must not remember the laws by halves, but must do everything according to them. The wife of Mahlon had come there, and if he wished to retain their fields, he had to marry her according to the law. So the man yielded both the field and the wife to Booz, who was himself also kin to the dead, saying that he already had a wife and children. Then Booz called the Senate to witness, and told the woman to loosen the man's shoe and spit in his face, according to the law. When this was done, Booz married Ruth, and within a year they had a son. Naomi herself became nurse to the child, and by the advice of the women, she called him Obed, because he was to be brought up to serve her in her old age, for Obed in the Hebrew dialect means servant. Obed's son was Jesse, and Jesse's son was David, who was king and left his dominions to his sons for 21 generations. Therefore I was obliged to relate this history of Ruth, because I wanted to demonstrate the power of God, who can without difficulty raise those of ordinary parentage to dignity and splendor, as he advanced David, though he was born from such humble parents. Now, because the affairs of the Hebrews were in a bad condition, they made war again against the Philistines. The occasion was this: Eli the high priest had 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas. These sons of Eli were guilty of injustice toward men and impiety toward God, and they abstained from no kind of wickedness. Some of the gifts they carried off as belonging to the honorable office they held, others they took away by violence. They were also guilty of impurity with the women who came to worship God at the tabernacle, forcing some to submit to their lust and enticing others with bribes. Indeed, the whole course of their lives was no better than tyranny. Their father was therefore angry at them for their wickedness, and expected that God would suddenly inflict punishments on them for what they had done. The multitude also took their conduct very seriously. As soon as God had foretold the calamity that would befall Eli's sons, which he did both to Eli himself and to Samuel the prophet, who was still only a child, Eli openly showed his sorrow over the destruction of his sons. I will first finish what I have to say about the prophet Samuel, and after that I will go on to speak of the sons of Eli and the miseries they brought on the whole people of the Hebrews. Elkanah, a Levite of moderate condition among his fellow citizens, lived at Ramathaim, a city of the tribe of Ephraim. He married 2 wives, Hannah and Peninnah. He had children by Peninnah, but he loved Hannah more, although she was barren. Elkanah came with his wives to the city of Shiloh to sacrifice, because the tabernacle of God was fixed there, as we have already said. After he had sacrificed, he distributed portions of the flesh at that festival to his wives and children. When Hannah saw the other wives' children sitting around their mother, she fell into tears and lamented over her barrenness and loneliness. Her grief overcame the consolations her husband offered her, and she went to the tabernacle to beseech God to give her offspring and make her a mother. She vowed to consecrate the first son she bore to the service of God, and to do so in such a way that his manner of life would not be like that of ordinary men. As Hannah continued a long time at her prayers, Eli the high priest, who was sitting there before the tabernacle, told her to go away, thinking she was disordered by wine. But she said that she had drunk only water, and that she was in sorrow for lack of children and was beseeching God for them. Then Eli told her to be of good cheer and said that God would send her children. So she came to her husband full of hope and ate her meal with gladness. When they returned to their own country, she found herself pregnant. A son was born to them, and they gave him the name Samuel, which may be understood as one asked of God. They therefore came to the tabernacle to offer sacrifice for the birth of the child, and they brought their tithes with them. But the woman remembered the vows she had made concerning her son, and delivered him to Eli, dedicating him to God so that he might become a prophet. Accordingly his hair was allowed to grow long, and his drink was water. So Samuel lived and was brought up in the temple. Elkanah also had other sons by Hannah, and 3 daughters. When Samuel was 12 years old, he began to prophesy. Once, while he was asleep, God called him by name. Supposing that he had been called by the high priest, Samuel came to him. But the high priest said that he had not called him. God did this 3 times. Eli was then sufficiently enlightened to say to him that he himself had been silent now as before, and that it was God who was calling him. Therefore Samuel should signify this to God and say that he was present and ready. So when Samuel heard God speak again, he asked him to speak and deliver whatever oracles he pleased to him, for he would not fail to perform any service in which God should use him. Since you are here ready, learn what miseries are coming upon the Israelites, such miseries indeed as words cannot describe and faith can hardly believe. The sons of Eli shall die on one day, and the priesthood shall be transferred into the family of Eleazar, because Eli has loved his sons more than he has loved my worship, and has done so to a degree that is not for their advantage. Eli obliged the prophet by oath to tell him this message, for otherwise Samuel had no inclination to afflict him by telling it. From then on Eli had a much more certain expectation of the destruction of his sons. But the glory of Samuel increased more and more, because experience showed that whatever he prophesied came to pass accordingly. About this time the Philistines made war against the Israelites and pitched their camp at the city of Phek. After the Israelites had waited for them a little while, they joined battle the very next day. The Philistines were victorious, killed more than 4,000 of the Hebrews, and pursued the rest of their multitude back to their camp. The Hebrews, fearing the worst, sent to the Senate and to the high priest. They asked them to bring the ark of God, so that when they drew themselves up in battle with it present among them, they might prove too strong for their enemies. They did not reflect that the one who had condemned them to endure these calamities was greater than the ark, and that it was for his sake that the ark had come to be honored. So the ark came, and the sons of the high priest came with it. They had received a charge from their father that, if they intended to survive the capture of the ark, they should never again come into his presence. Phinehas was already officiating as high priest, because his father had resigned the office to him on account of his great age. The Hebrews were full of courage, supposing that by the coming of the ark they would be too strong for their enemies. Their enemies also were greatly concerned and afraid because the ark had come to the Israelites. However, the outcome did not agree with the expectations of either side. When battle was joined, the victory the Hebrews expected was gained by the Philistines, and the defeat the Philistines feared fell to the Israelites. The Israelites thereby discovered that they had put their trust in the ark in vain. They were immediately beaten as soon as they came to close combat with their enemies, and lost about 30,000 men, among whom were the sons of the high priest. The ark was carried away by the enemies. When news of this defeat and of the captivity of the ark came to Shiloh, brought there by a certain young man, a Benjamite who had been in the action, the whole city was filled with lamentations. Eli the high priest was sitting on a high throne at one of the gates. When he heard their mournful cries, he supposed that some strange thing had happened to his family. So he sent for the young man. When he learned what had happened in the battle, he was not greatly troubled about his sons, or about what was also told him concerning the army, because he had already known by divine revelation that these things would happen and had himself declared them beforehand. Sad things distress men most when they come unexpectedly. But as soon as he heard that the ark had been carried captive by their enemies, he was deeply grieved, because this had happened quite differently from what he expected. He fell down from his throne and died, having lived 98 years in all, and having held the government 40 of those years. On the same day, the wife of his son Phinehas also died, being unable to survive the misfortune of her husband, for they told her of her husband's death while she was in labor. However, she bore a son at 7 months, and he lived. They gave him the name Ichabod, which means disgrace, because the army had received a disgrace at that time. Eli was the first of the family of Ithamar, the other son of Aaron, to hold the government. At first the family of Eleazar officiated as high priest, with the son continually receiving that honor from the father. Eleazar bequeathed it to his son Phinehas. After Phinehas, his son Abiezer took the honor, and delivered it to his son, whose name was Bucky. From Bucky his son Ozi received it. After Ozi, Eli, of whom we have been speaking, held the priesthood. Eli and his posterity continued in it until the time of Solomon's reign, but then the posterity of Eleazar took it up again.
And the book 5 ends: the ark in enemy hands, Eli dead, and a grieving people leaderless, but with a boy grown into a prophet whom all Israel will come to trust. The age of the judges is over the age of Samuel, and after him the kings is about to begin. What becomes of the captured ark, the rise of Samuel, and the people's fateful demand for a king is where book 6 begins. Thank you for sitting with the whole of book 5, from the walls of Jericho to the fall of the house of Eli. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.